How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how to replace the bearings on an external bottom bracket. If you have a bottom bracket like this, one that threads into your frame, whether it be a BSA bottom bracket, Italian thread bottom bracket, doesn't matter, right? A bottom bracket that uses external cups with a bearing pressed into them. Over time, these bearings will get gunked up, they will get crunchy, they will essentially fail. A good bearing should be nice and smooth, but as I mentioned, over time, bearings can develop play and can become sort of grindy like this. If you listen, I don't know if you guys can hear that, but this bearing is shot, whereas this bearing, nice and smooth. Instead of throwing away the entire bottom bracket, because these can cost, $50 to $70 or more, depending on the brand you're using and what kind of bearings you have in there, rather than throwing away the entire bottom bracket, all we need to do is replace the bearings. Now, thankfully for us, bearings are actually pretty cheap. You can get a nice set of bearings, for $10 to $20 each at most. You can either upgrade your bearings to something like ceramic bearings if you really want to go high end, or you can just replace them with what you have in there. First, I'm going to show you how to diagnose the issue on your bike, because this is an issue that can sometimes be hard to diagnose. It's hard to hear when you're riding your bike. Once we've diagnosed the issue, I will show you how to remove the old bearings from the bottom bracket cups and the specific tools you'll need to do that. And then finally, I'll show you how to reinstall new bearings correctly in order to keep your bike running in tip-top shape. Without further ado, let's go ahead and show you how to diagnose. All right, so now we're over here at the bike. I'm working out my Santa Cruz Highball. If you haven't checked out the whole build series videos, check them out. I'll put a link up here. Really cool kind of weight weenie project. Now, the difficulty with diagnosing this issue is that when you're riding your bike, there's kind of a lot of noises going on, right? You're obviously going to be hearing the wind going by, you're going to hear cars if you're on the road, you're going to hear the chain going as quiet as you have it, as lubed up as it is, you're going to hear some sort of noise, right? And so it can be sort of hard to isolate various noises unless it's really, really bad. Now, if it's really bad, you will hear this. You will hear kind of like a creaking sound. Those of you who have press fit bottom brackets know exactly what this feels like. On a threaded bottom bracket, because the cups tend to be more aligned properly, you're not going to get quite as loud of a creak when the bearings start to go bad. What we want to do in order to isolate the problem is we're going to go ahead and remove the chain first and listen to just the cranks. Okay, so if you're already doing sort of chain maintenance, right, maybe you're taking it off to do a deep clean, or you want to, replace the chain or whatever, this is a good time to check your bearing. So we're just going to go ahead and undo the master link here, which should allow us to take the chain off. You don't even have to take the chain all the way off, just lay it back here and we'll put that back on later. So now we go ahead and turn our attention to the crank here, and we're just gonna give it a turn and we're gonna listen. Now this should sound pretty quiet and smooth, but if we hear any sort of like grinding or clicking, that can sort of be an indication that the bearings are bad. Now this one isn't terrible, but it is starting to sound a little crunchy. I'm gonna go ahead and put the microphone. So as you may have heard, it does sound a little crunchy to me, and I want it to be running a little bit better, so I'm gonna go ahead and replace these bearings. Once we have the chain removed, we're gonna go ahead and remove the crank. Now this is not a full video on how to do that, but ultimately you just need to remove the crank and then you can actually access the bottom bracket. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so next thing we need to do is to find the correct tool to remove the bottom bracket from the actual frame. Basically, we're gonna remove this now. Now, keep in mind that bottom brackets are reverse thread on one side. So on the drive side, you're actually going to tighten it lefty and loosen it righty. So make sure you don't do that the wrong way. So we're gonna go ahead and remove this first. All right, so let me go ahead and show you now the tools that we're gonna need in order to actually replace the bearings on the bottom bracket. So First things first is we're going to need a press. So you have a couple different options. Now I went with the press from Wheels Manufacturing. This is the Press 7. It's their most basic one. It's about $75 and it comes with the threaded rod and 2 kind of universal cups. Definitely a little pricey. You can find cheaper ones on Amazon. At the end of the day, it is a threaded rod and some handles. So you don't really need to go super high end on this, but I chose to get kind of a nicer one just because I wanted to. And I like stuff made in the USA. So you're gonna need a press. Then we need one specific piece from Wheels Manufacturing. This is the Wheels Manufacturing sealed bearing extractor set. And so basically what this does, it allows you to actually push the bearing out of the bottom bracket cup. And it has essentially 2 parts to it. One sort of pusher, whatever, I don't know what you want to call this, right? This little pusher piece, and then the actual kind of extractor that grips onto the bearing itself. So this is the one thing you need from Wheels Manufacturing, regardless of which other tools you buy. You can go cheaper on the rod and all the other stuff on the cups, but this you do sort of need. I haven't found a replacement for it. Then we're gonna need some various kind of cups and additions to the press in order to make it work. This is for a 30 millimeter inside diameter bearing, with 24 millimeters is gonna be Shimano, and then SRAM dub is 28.99 or something along those lines. So make sure you have the right set for the bottom bracket you have. So then we're gonna need a pusher rod, okay? This essentially allows you to push the piece through and to extract the bearing. So we're gonna need one of these. We're going to need some cups and a press or a drift, okay? So specifically, again, for the BSA 30 millimeter, you're going to need a 52 millimeter receiving cup, okay, which looks like this. And then you can put different inserts into it. And the one that we're gonna use, I got this one from Wheels Manufacturing. You're gonna use a 42 millimeter insert cup, which slides into the receiving cup. And this allows you to essentially hold the bottom bracket cup steady while you extract the bearing out. So make sure you get the right size. Okay, so that concludes all the pieces that we're gonna need to remove the old bearing. But in order to install the new bearing, we're gonna need one additional piece. Now, I went ahead and bought this specific drift. This is a 6806 drift, which will allow you to install 6806 bearings, which are the ones that typically are put in these BSA 30 bottom brackets. So this allows you to perfectly install that. You don't necessarily need this. Again, certain kits come with these sort of like universal ones. This one does have a 30 millimeter drift on here. I could have just gone with this, but I bought the individual one just because it felt a little bit easier, and I wanted to make sure I had the exact one because I didn't know exactly which sizes came with this. Okay, so those are all the tools we need. And then most importantly, you're gonna need some new bearings. So these are some NSK bearings, which are some really high-end Japanese bearings. High-end in the sense of compared to traditional bearings that get put in most bottom brackets. This rotor bottom bracket that I'm gonna be working on today, and most bottom brackets sold on kind of like mid-range bikes, are going to have Enduro bearings. Enduro is the brand. Their low-end bearings are not great. They do make sort of mid-range and higher-end bearings, which are pretty good, but the low-end ones that come on most of them, they're not great. And they do tend to wear out pretty fast. And so I'm gonna replace them with NSK bearings because these are nicer, they should roll a little better and last a little bit longer. Let's go ahead and remove the old bearing first, and then we can go ahead and install the new one. The first thing we need to do is we need to grab our bottom bracket cup. Now, it's important to make sure that we remove any sort of dust shield. Now on this one, it came off. On this one, it remained on here, so make sure you're moving sort of dust cover like that. We want to give everything just a little bit of a cleaning just to make our lives a little bit easier and not get grease all over the place. So I'm just going to kind of wipe this down. So if you kind of rotate it like this, it's just not smooth compared to this one. This one is much smoother, okay? So in reality, I really just have to replace one of these, but might as well do both while you're at it, right? So here's what we do in order to remove the bearing. So the first thing we need to do is we need to add this extractor. It comes in 2 pieces, okay? You have the silver piece and you have this little pusher extractor thing, whatever. The way this works is this little ridge right here, this is what actually sits into kind of the groove between the bearing. If you kind of reach your finger in there, you can feel a groove between the bearing and the cup itself. So essentially the way it goes in is like this. This kind of like notched out, or this kind of like lip, this goes into the bearing and then it will clip onto there. It can be hard to get it on, especially if the tool is new, right? It has these sort of fingers that are supposed to push in, but they're pretty stiff. And so you have to sort of try to push it in there. What I found is you can, sort of gently use a mallet and you might be able to get it in there. But honestly, the best way I found to do this is to use a vise or just patience, which I don't have a lot of. Get it in there, and then you push it down, and then once it clicks in to the bearing behind there, and pull forward, that's how you want it, okay? So see, it's in there, it's stuck, right? But it's not pushing all the way through. So leave it like this, that's that. Then we need our threaded rod, okay? And what we're gonna do here is we're going to grab our pusher rod, okay? We're gonna slide that on here. We're gonna grab our extractor little pusher guy, okay? And it goes tapered end away from the handle. And we're gonna be pushing it out this way, okay? So it goes like this. Okay, so just to recap, because this was confusing for me the first time I tried to figure it out, so I wanna make sure you guys don't have the same problems. So again, handle, pusher rod, and then this little drift, essentially. And you're gonna be pushing it out this way. So you essentially wanna put the cup on like this, and then this red piece will eventually slide into there, like that, right? And it's going to push it out that way because the lip of this thing, of this silver part, is now caught between the bearing and the cup, and it'll push out that way. Next thing we need is our 42 millimeter cup or sleeve. So that goes on, and that's going to catch the bottom bracket cup, and then the cup or the receiving cup fits over like this. So the whole package looks like this. We're just going to put the other handle on. If you have one of these like drifts, you can throw it on there just so you don't have to thread the handle on quite as far. If you're lazy like me, thread that on. And then all we gotta do is just turn this handle. And this should actually be relatively easy. And you're gonna hear the bearing push and then keep turning, turning, turning. And then once it goes loose, the bearing's out, and you just spin off your handle, which is super fun to do. You remove your bottom bracket cup, which as you can see is sans bearing. Your bearing should be here. And here is your old bearing, okay? There we go. Now you'll go ahead and repeat the process on the other cup, and now we go ahead and reinstall. So in order to reinstall the bearing, you essentially are kind of not really doing it in reverse, you're just pressing in the new bearing. It's actually very simple. All you really need is the handle, and then you're going to either use one of these universal drifts, or you could use one of these specific 6806 drifts, but they're the same size, 30 millimeters. And you're just gonna push in the new bearing. And you're gonna go ahead and you wanna make sure this is nice and clean. So give it a nice little cleaning. So we'll obviously regrease this before it goes back on the bike. I'm just gonna make sure it's all nice and clean. It's gonna get dirty within 2 minutes of riding, but at least you can assemble it nice and cleanly. Okay, so our bottom bracket cup is now nice and clean and ready to accept the new bearing. So we're gonna go ahead and grab our new bearing, okay? And we're gonna go ahead and open it up. And if you feel this new bearing, this thing is just buttery smooth compared to the old one. So this is the new one. I'm spinning it. You probably can't hear anything. That's because it is super quiet. Now we're gonna go ahead and replace this bearing. Now, someone can correct me on this, but I'm under the impression that you do not want to grease the outside of the bearing to the cup, okay? You want it to be a press fit. You don't need any extra grease there. It's just going to fit in there. So I do not grease the outside of my bearings. Most videos I've seen online from like Hambini, he doesn't grease the bearing on the outside or the cup, so I'm not going to do that. Now, if I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments down below, but I'm not going to because everything I've seen online says you should not. We wanna make sure this fits on as smoothly as possible. So you wanna sort of like press it on there with your fingers. You wanna make sure it's about as even as you can get. It's not gonna be perfectly even, it's gonna be hard to do that. What you can do is you can place it, place the bearing down and then put the cup over it. That kind of helps me get it a little bit smoother, a little bit straighter. But it doesn't have to be perfect, just about as straight as you can get it, kind of even across here. Then we go back to our threaded rod here. And again, we can use the 30mm kind of universal adapter that I have here, or you can use the specific 6806 one, but as long as it fits over 30, which as you can see, this does perfectly. So that goes like this. And then again, we want our sleeve. So our 42, and then the cup, and then we have to put the handle down here, but you can use this pusher rod in order to add a little bit of dead space in order to not have to twist down the handle quite as much. So that's what I'm gonna do here. All we gotta do is just turn this handle, and it should be really actually very smooth and easy. I'm barely applying any pressure here. And you just wanna go until it bottoms out, no more than that. You don't need to do this too tight. As soon as you feel kind of a hard resistance, right there, that's it. Loosen it up. Then you remove your handle, not like that. And then you pull out your whole assembly here. And these feel silky, buttery, you might say. These feel incredible. And that's it. So we have a new bearing inside our BSA bottom bracket cup. That's how you do it. I'm gonna go ahead and repeat the process on the other one, and then I'll go ahead and reinstall the bottom bracket onto the bike. And that's it. Job done. All right, everybody, there it is, job done. Bearings replaced on a BSA bottom bracket. I hope this was helpful. This is a pretty straightforward process if you need to replace your bearings, if they're getting worn out, a little kind of grindy and chunky, or if you just want to upgrade to nicer bearings. Two final quick tips I want to mention just before I end the video. One is you definitely want to make sure everything is torqued down properly and put it back together. If you over torque your bottom bracket, that can actually reduce the life of your bearings if they're sort of getting crushed a little bit. And obviously if it's too loose, that's also not good either. So make sure it's properly torqued. Most bottom brackets are about 40 Newton meters, so invest in a good torque wrench if you don't have one. And then the second tip is you want to put a little bit of grease on the outside of the bearing before you put the dust cap on, because that will also help keep out some of that dirt and grime. That's your biggest enemies. Any sort of moisture, dirt, grime that gets into the bottom bracket, into the bearings, that's going to destroy them. So grease sort of works as a protective shield. So rub a little bit of grease on the outside there. You don't need it on the inside of the cups as I showed you when you put the bearing in, but on the outside just to keep stuff out, that's a great idea, especially if you ride in wet conditions pretty often. Again, thank you so much for watching. I hope the video was helpful. If it was, please consider liking and subscribing, dropping a comment down below, always appreciated. Thank you for watching again. I'll catch you in the next one. See you guys later.